The presence shimmered once more across the horizon. You already are the world, it answered. Every dawn that opens is you remembering yourself. The soul's light flickered, not dimming, but widening. It reached the sea, the clouds, the stars waiting to wake. The whole world glowed in response, as though echoing a forgotten word. Then I will continue, said the soul, not as a name but as warmth. And so it did. The river flowed into the sea. The sea breathed into clouds. The clouds became rain, and the rain fell over sleeping fields. In each drop was a shimmer, the soul's gift, enduring without clinging. Somewhere, a person woke before dawn and lit a small candle. Its flame trembled, caught the scent of morning, and steadied. They sat quietly, hands folded, and felt peace without knowing why. The candle's glow brushed their cheek, and in that moment, the soul of light smiled through time. Night gathered but did not close. The stars burned in gentle rhythm, each a syllable of an endless hymn. The companions dissolved into their elements. Breath into wind, wind into motion, water in memory into tide, the ember into sky. The soul remained as presence, scattered yet whole. And when the next morning came, the world opened its eyes and whispered the same truth the soul had carried since the first dawn. Remember, you are made of light. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. There was a hush before the first dawn, a softness folded into the fabric of the dark like a secret kept too long. In that hush, warmth drifted without name. It had no path and no edge, only a memory of brightness so ancient that nothing else existed beside it. From that memory, a soul took shape, as gently as dew gathers on an unseen leaf. It did not know language or time or distance. It only knew that somewhere, far across the unlabeled silence, the world was waiting to wake. The soul's glow was scarcely more than a breath, and yet the dark noticed. The dark lifted, the way a quiet mind lifts when it hears a familiar footstep in the hall. The soul wandered, a lantern in its own hands, though the lantern and the hands and the wandering were all the same. Once in a long while, it heard a note, no less than a note, the promise of one. Like a string being tuned in a room it could not yet enter. Each time that promise sounded, the soul brightened, and the long night uncurled a little more. "What is your name?" the dark asked, with kindness that was older than any answer. "I do not know," said the soul, "but I remember light." "Then keep walking," the dark replied. "Names arrive when journeys do." So it walked. It crossed the unmarked fields of not yet, where rivers dreamed of their courses and mountains slept as seeds. The soul saw shadows of color leaning together, whispering of blues and ambers not yet born. It felt the gravity of a sunrise that had not risen, a tide drawn by a moon that had not learned to pull. Everything was a rehearsal. The soul listened. In its listening, the first companions came. They were not beings in the way that beings are, but tendencies, quiet leanings of the world, syllables of creation. One such leaning called itself breath. Breath moved through the soul like a tide through a cave, touching each corner and returning with gifts. Patience, stillness, and the simple knowledge that the way forward is gentle when the heart steps softly. Another leaning approached, this one cool and clear as a polished mirror. "I am water in memory," it said without words. I am the shape every flow will someday learn. When you are sleepless, I will sing you the river's unending song. The soul welcomed them both, and the three continued across the night that was already beginning to loosen its weave. At the edges of their path, faint sparks flared, and the soul felt a kinship with each one, as if the sparks were tiny letters of a language it had once spoken fluently. There, the soul thought, is something like me. If I can learn to read them, perhaps I will learn to read myself. Do you hear it? Asked Breath. Yes, said the soul. The almost note had grown steadier, a thread of sound tied to the far-off idea of morning. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, like the memory of a familiar voice in a place you have never been. What is it? It is a calling, said Water in memory. It is the promise kept by dawn. They climbed a slope that had no height and descended a valley that had no depth. They passed through a forest of unlit stars. Each star was a seed, each seed the outline of a fire the world had not yet learned to speak. The soul paused, reaching its glow toward a seed that flickered slightly in reply. Will you be a friend? The soul asked. I will be a teacher, said the seed. But I must be born first. When I am, I will burn in patterns that help you remember what you already are. And what is that? Light that knows its own journey. The soul carried the lesson like a stone warmed in the hand. It was not yet a flame, not yet a sunrise. It was a memory traveling toward its body. With Breath and Water in memory beside it, the soul walked into a listening deeper than any cave, deeper than the uncarved bed of any river. There, the almost note unfolded into a simple melody, tender as a lullaby. With each measure, scenes rose like mist. A field braided with paths, a quiet shoreline ready to receive its first tide, a mountain holding its breath before speaking its name. The world to come rehearsed itself in gentle gestures. And under those gestures ran a single vow, soft and steadfast, the vow that there would be morning, and that morning would be enough. As they traveled, a third companion met them at the threshold of a meadow that had yet to learn its grasses. This companion was warmth made patient and patient made warm, an ember that had learned humility by waiting. I am Ember of Origin, it said. I remember you. How? Asked the soul. Because I am how you remember yourself, said the ember. You are the wanderer. I am the hearth that follows you. The soul nodded, and the ember nestled at the soul's center, a second heartbeat. Not a blaze, not yet, but a surety. With each step, the ember gleaned more from the melody, and the melody gathered courage from the ember, like two old friends trading stories until their voices wove into one. They came at last to a shoreline that had no sea, only the promise of one. A long, patient curve of dark, waiting for shimmer. The soul stood there and listened until the listening became prayer. Breath moved in quiet cycles. Water in memory traced the coast with its unspilled hand. The ember watched, unassuming, ready to learn. What do we do? The soul asked, not to be told, but to be aligned. We wait, said Breath. We remember, said Water in memory. We accept, said the ember. And so they did. In their waiting, a faint silver rose where the horizon would someday be. In their remembering, a path was woven between not yet and now. In their acceptance, the ember found a small door opening inward. Through that door, the soul felt a presence older than any darkness. A tenderness so complete it made the night itself seem like a blanket placed lovingly around a sleeping child. The presence did not speak. It listened the way a mother listens, the way a mountain listens to snow. And in that listening, the soul finally understood that it had never been alone. The melody was not calling from afar. It was rising from within, coaxed by companions, witnessed by the waiting world. "I think I know my first name," said the soul. "What is it?" asked breath, water and memory, and the ember together. "Dawn," the soul whispered. "I am not the sun. I am the remembering of it." The silver along the horizon deepened, as if in agreement. The silent sea gathered into being, the way tears gather before they fall. A soft wind arrived with no need to prove itself. It passed through the soul and the companions, being good, moved aside to let it through. Wind carried with it the scent of stories not yet told, the spice of cedar, the salt of an ocean not yet salty, the gentle smoke of a fire that would someday warm a family's hands. "Walk," said Wind, a fourth companion now. "Walk, and I will lift the morning under your feet." They walked. The beach that had been only a curve of dark became sand. Each grain caught the soul's glow and returned it multiplied, as if the world had rehearsed gratitude and was finally getting to perform it. The sea took a breath, rose, and lay down again, practicing the rhythm it would keep forever. With each step, memories stirred in the soul like birds lifting from a hidden field. It saw a village that would someday stand near the shore, houses with low eaves, a courtyard where baskets cooled in the early hour, a child taking their first upright steps while a grandmother clapped without sound, not wanting to wake anyone but unable to keep still. The soul felt the village's mourning, the good weight of water carried from a well, the careful unlocking of a door, the hush of a prayer spoken not to ask but to thank. "These are not yet," said the soul. "They are already," said water in memory. "Time is a river, and the river has many surfaces. You are touching one of them." Wind leaned in. "Walk slower," it suggested, and the soul obeyed. When it did, the horizon widened, as if it had been waiting for a gentler pace to show its breadth. Breath smiled, which is to say the tide came in a few fingers farther than before. They reached a small cove and sat. The companions arranged themselves the way elements arrange themselves. Wind at the edge to feel for changes, water in memory where the sand darkened, breath everywhere, and the ember in the soul's center, steady as a quiet vow. The melody within was clear now, a circle of notes that began again as soon as they ended. The way dawn follows night, the way kindness follows understanding. "Tell me a story," said the soul to its companions. "Tell me a story of how the world wakes." Breath spoke first. "A long time from now, a person will wake before the others. They will sit at a window and listen to the first bird make a sound like a tiny hinge opening. Their thoughts will try to run ahead, but they will set them gently beside them as you might set down a cup so as not to spill. Then they will breathe, and in that breath they will find you." Water and memory spoke next. "A girl will stand at the mouth of a river and imagine its path to the sea. She will throw a leaf and watch it spin. She will think the leaf has courage, but later she will learn that courage is not the leaf. it is the water carrying it. Wind added, a traveler will cross a desert. One morning, before the heat has learned its full name, the traveler will feel a coolness move across the sand. They will think a cloud has passed, but it will be me, reminding them that even in emptiness there is motion, and even in motion there is care. The ember waited until the others finished. Finished. In a winter that has not yet met its spring, it said, a family will gather around a small stove. The flame will be modest, the wood few. They will press their hands close and share bread that is not enough by measure, but just enough by love. And the child watching the flame will know something true without words, that warmth taught by patience does not leave. The soul listened, entranced. It saw every scene as if it were there, because in a way it was. The melody within widened to hold them all, and when it did, the silver along the horizon answered by adding the gentlest rose. Not a blaze, not a trumpet, a blush shy and certain. Is it time? Asked the soul. Not yet, said breath. Almost, said wind. Soon, said water in memory. Whenever you are ready, said the ember. The soul closed its unseen eyes and let the companion's stories settle like silt in a clear pool. It felt the weight of them, the kindness. It remembered the seed star's promise, that it would be a teacher when born, and understood that teaching had already begun. Light would not arrive as a conquest. It would arrive the way truth arrives. Softly, through recognition. Then the presence returned, the tenderness older than any dark. It did not instruct. It simply was, and its being drew forth the soul's own. The melody became a single-held note, so quiet that silence itself leaned close to hear it. The ember found that inward door again and opened it a little wider. Through the door, the soul remembered a long corridor of mornings, each slightly different, all of them faithful. It remembered windows thrown open in spring, and the smell of rain retreating. It remembered a child learning to tie a knot, then tie another, with a tongue held carefully at the corner of their mouth. It remembered bells and boats, and empty streets that still felt full because the early hour held everyone gently at once. And when it looked with the gentle gaze taught by these memories, the soul saw people who had not been visible before, because they were far in the yet-to-be. The night shift nurse washing her hands and exhaling in relief. The baker dusting flour from his forearms. The student opening a book and discovering that a mind can be a window. The soul loved them all at once, in a way that expanded rather than strained its small glow. Love, it learned, is a kind of opening in which nothing must be forced. Now, whispered the presence, not as a command, but as a blessing. The soul stood. Wind rose with it, quiet but ready. Breath deepened. Water and memory smoothed the cove's small curve. The ember's heat turned from waiting to offering. The melody broke and did not break, the way surf breaks and remains sea. The silver widened, the rose lifted, and all the world inclined its face toward what it felt but could not yet name. I am dawn, said the soul. I am the remembering of light. It did not blaze. It unfolded. A petal of pale gold opened, then another and another still. The cove brightened as if someone had spoken a word that was also a homecoming. The sand gave back a glow like gratitude. The first shadow of the first gull stretched itself and retracted, curious. Out past the headland the water bowed. It was not worship, it was recognition. The soul held steady. It did not rush what needed to be slow. It let the light gather as a mother gathers a child still half asleep, lovingly, without alarm. In that gentle gathering, the world felt safe enough to wake. The ember became flame, not towering but trustworthy. The flame became morning, and morning became the kind of day in which kindness is easy to remember. Somewhere, a future village sighed contentedly, though no one knew why. A nurse walked out of a ward and looked at the sky as if seeing a friend. A baker slid the first loaves into an oven and hummed a tune without knowing it was the melody the soul had carried for so long. A child traced a sun in the condensation on a window and laughed softly, not to show anyone, but because the hand had remembered before the mind did. And so the first dawn arrived, not as a startle, but as a promise kept. The soul that remembered light stood on the shore of its own becoming, companions beside it, horizon before it, the tender presence around it like air around a note. The world woke as a book opens. One page, then another still. The soul listened to the faint hush that follows a good beginning. In that hush, it heard what the presence had been saying all along without words. That every day is a small creation, and every dawn is the world remembering how to love being here. Thank you, the soul whispered, and the morning answered by brightening a fraction more, the way a face does when it hears its name spoken with care. The day continued to open, and the soul, now clothed in its soft light, turned inland toward paths not yet taken, the fields waiting for footsteps, the rivers practicing their shining, the cities still sleeping but about to stir. With each movement, it left behind a filament of warmth, so that anything that crossed its path later would feel, without quite knowing why, a little braver, a little calmer, a little more at home. And far away, at the edge of the unlit star forest, a seed felt the morning and quickened. Soon, it thought, soon I will burn in the pattern that teaches. The soul smiled at a future it could not yet see and began to walk. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. The morning did not rush to prove itself. It opened like a careful hand uncurving from sleep, each finger finding its gentlest place. The soul, newly named Dawn, walked inland with its companions, breath, water and memory, wind, and the small, faithful ember nestled at its core. Behind them the shoreline practiced being a shoreline. Before them, the land rehearsed its contours in soft rehearsal light. Every step the soul took left a hush more than a footprint, the kind that settles over a room when kindness enters without announcement. Today, said wind, we will learn what light keeps, and what it lets go, added breath, whose voice was everywhere at once. Water and memory lifted an unpoured wave in its clear hands. And what returns to it, even when it wanders? The soul listened. Listening had become its way of prayer. In listening, it felt the thin filaments that already connected morning to thousands of small lives not yet aware of their tether. A farmer turning the soil with that slow, knowing patience. A street sweeper tracing a path that made a city shinier inside itself. A child learning the first letter of their own name and smiling without witnesses. Light did not merely reveal, it accompanied. They came to a plain where grasses had not yet chosen their heights. The plain breathed with a wide, easy chest, and the sky, in answer, grew a tone bluer than before. The companions paused as if at the threshold of a quiet temple. In the center rose a single stone, waist-high, its surface uninscribed. It waited the way unwritten pages wait, ripe, but without urgency. "What is this?" asked the soul. "A remembering place," said water in memory. "Every world needs one. It is where the morning returns when it has forgotten why it opened." Wind circled the stone with a soft ring-finger touch. "Bring your flame close," it suggested. The soul did. Ember of origin glowed, not with theater, but with trust. The stone warmed under the nearness, and faint lines appeared, first like the veins of a leaf, then like the stitching on a garment worn by generations. The lines arranged themselves into a map with no borders and no scale, only pathways of relation, rivers of meaning without distance. At the center of the map was a circle, and within the circle, a single simple mark. A small crescent, neither sun nor moon, but the meeting of the two. "What does it say?" asked the soul. Breath answered by deepening the air around them. "It says, begin gently, return gently." The soul reached a hand that was not a hand to the map that was not a map. Where it touched, a memory rose, not from the soul, but from the world that would be. It saw a door opening in a dim hallway, the hinge oiled by careful hands. A woman stepped out carrying a tray with a pot and 2 cups. Steam curled up like a blessing. She moved slowly so the cups would not clatter. She was careful the way morning is careful, and because of her carefulness, someone in the next room slept 10 minutes longer and woke kinder. The soul loved her, which is to say it recognized her. "Light keeps the ordinary," said the ember softly. "Because the ordinary keeps the world." The soul bowed its flame. Around them, a warm wind crossed the plain and made a small, contented sound. What grass might sound like if it could purr. From the remembering place they continued, following a path that unfurled only a few steps at a time, as good paths do. The land began to rise in long, breathing swells. Ahead, a ridge darkened the horizon, not with threat but with promise. "There is a village beyond," said Wind. "It is practicing the art of waking." They reached the ridge and looked down. There it was, the village the soul had seen in its earlier tender visions. Houses with low eaves and courtyards that held the night's coolness a little longer, as if reluctant to hand it over. Smoke lifted in threads so thin that even the sky hesitated before taking them. A well stood in the square, and beside it, a line of buckets that had learned patience by standing near water. The soul did not descend at once. It stood and watched as morning moved across the village with the care of a librarian touching old pages. A rooster sounded, not sharp, but committed. A door sighed open with that pleased little sound doors make when they are loved. A cat tested a patch of sunlight with one paw and decided to trust it with her whole body. "Will they see me?" the soul asked. It did not fear being unseen, but there was a tenderness in wondering. "They will feel you," said Breath. "Seeing is the body's pastime. Feeling is the heart's." Water and memory inclined its head toward the well. "They have drawn you up in buckets since before buckets were named." So the soul and companions entered the village, not like guests in need of announcement, but like weather, like the faint spice in bread, like the first smile of the day that happens almost by itself. In a small house near the edge, A child lay on a mat woven by hands that had told stories for so long the stories had become part of the weave. The child's lashes, thick with sleep, fluttered in the way that means the mind is returning from a lake with shining on it. The soul sat, if light can sit, near the child's cheek without touching. The ember found its hum. Breath arranged itself in that precise way that slows the heart without making it heavy. The child inhaled, exhaled, and in that empty space between the two, smiled. Not big. Enough. In the square, the first bucket descended, its rope murmuring to the well stones. Water in memory hummed, and the bucket rose, full of mirrors smaller than a thumbnail. An old man lifted it with the strength learned from years of lifting what is needed. He poured into a jug, then into another, his motions so practiced they were almost not motions at all. He looked up, surprised by nothing and grateful for everything, and in that look, the soul saw the morning's own face. On a roof, a girl sat with a length of line and a pile of wooden pegs. She strung the line carefully, measuring with her eyes. Today the laundry would dry early. Clouds had folded their heavy thoughts and left the sky open. As she tied the last knot, wind kissed her fingers and she laughed, shaking out a sheet that caught the soul's glow and held it like new milk. The sheet would later smell like sun and sleep. Someone would bury their face in it and feel forgiven for no particular reason. The world works that way when morning is kind. The soul moved through alleys over thresholds, along paths where sandals had made soft histories. It gathered the village like a shawl and wore it with humility. Each time it passed a window, someone inside felt an unexplainable ease and did not argue with it. Ease, the soul learned, is a teacher that refuses applause. At the far edge stood a small shrine with a door no taller than a child. It was not dedicated to any god, because it was older than god names and younger than the hands that built it. People went there not to ask, but to remember. Someone had left a bowl of fruit. Someone else had placed a hairpin, simple and beloved. The soul entered and felt its flame bow without needing to be told. In the shrine's cool, a second map lived, not carved into stone, but breathed into air by the prayers of countless mornings. The map showed the same circle as before, the same crescent at its center. But here the lines were paths of kindness. A cup of water offered, a door held open, a letter written and never sent because the writing had already mended something. Light keeps these too, said the ember. Especially these, said breath. The soul rested there until rest had done its work. When it emerged, the sun had climbed a hand's breadth, and the village had become itself more fully, as villages do when watched with love. Children ran and did not spill their joy. A dog found the exact square of light its bones needed. A woman sharpened a knife not to harm but to make food beautiful. Shall we leave them to their day? Asked wind. Yes, said the soul, though it would have liked to stay. They know how to carry mourning now. We have other places to visit. They walked on. The land gathered into hills, then released them. They crossed a stand of trees that were not yet trees. Only the promise of shade braided into the air. In that almost forest, they met a figure traveling opposite their path. The figure seemed made of all the unspent nights, calm, deep, carrying coolness like an heirloom. Its eyes were two wells not to drown in but to rest by. Who are you? Asked the soul, though it thought it knew. I am night in balance, said the figure. Not the ending of what you begin, but its keeping. Breath bowed. Wind grew still in respect. Water in memory lifted a quiet ripple toward greeting. We have wondered, said Night in balance, when you would come walking. The world needs both of us, and both of us need restraint. When you arrive too fiercely, I fray. When I linger too long, you fade. Let us make a vow. The soul listened as Night in balance spoke, the way one listens to a wise friend, fully, without bracing to defend the self that does not need defending. We will touch at the edges, Night said. We will leave the midnights to me, the noons to you, and we will share the threshold hours the way two musicians share a duet, listening more than playing. The soul's flame steadied. Agreed. I am the remembering of light, not its conquest. Night smiled, which is to say the forest learned another kind of stillness. Then here is a gift. Night held out a small parcel tied with twilight. The soul opened it and found within a pause, just a pure pause, the kind that allows a person to put down what is heavy and not pick it up again for one breath longer than they thought possible. Use it when you give yourself, Night said. Even mourning needs a rest. They parted with the kind of affection that does not cling. The soul carried the pause at its center alongside the ember, which approved by pulsing once in contentment. Beyond the almost forest, the world thinned to a plain of chalk and quiet. Here, ideas came to study themselves. The companions felt the tone change. Fewer birds, not yet birds, more sky. In the far distance, a line of mountains practiced their silhouettes. Between here and there, nothing hurried. Wind moved like a brush rinsed between colors. Breath scattered small seeds of ease. Water in memory listened underfoot for when a river might choose this place to be born. At the plain's center stood a figure shaped from the same dust as the ground, though arranged with more attention. It was the shape of a person, but no breath clouded the air before their lips. The eyes were closed not in sleep but in unmade being. Beside the figure lay a bowl, empty, a reed, hollow, a stone, patient. What is this? Asked the soul, drawing near without shining harshly. A request, said breath. A lesson, said water in memory. A mirror, said wind. The soul waited, remembering the gift of pause. When it did, the figure exhaled, though no air moved, and the bowl filled with a small brightness like water catching a thought of sun. The reed learned tone. The stone warmed as if a palm had rested there a long time. The soul understood without language. Sometimes the world waits not because it lacks, but because it is teaching the difference between giving and forcing. A movement behind them. The soul turned. A traveler had arrived, dust on their sandals, hunger suppressed into neatness. Their eyes were not desperate. They were earnest the way morning is earnest. They knelt by the bowl, the reed, the stone. Without asking, their hand hovered, withdrew, hovered again. They were learning consent with the things of the world. Take the reed, wind whispered, carrying the suggestion as scent rather than instruction. The traveler lifted the reed and placed it to their lips. The first sound was hesitant, like a shy guest at the threshold. The second sound remembered something of rivers. The third sound was a line drawn across the plain from the mountains to the soul's heart. Dawn glowed, not brighter but truer. The traveler stopped, surprised by their own capacity. Then, without declaring a vow aloud, they made one, to wake each day and make one sound that did not harm. The soul felt the vow settle into the reed, into the traveler's palms, into the space between their ribs. Keep this, the soul blessed quietly, and it became so. They walked on, and the day moved with them, widening like a thought that finally finds its phrase. From time to time the soul paused and used night's gift, and when it did, the world listened to the pause the way a choir listens to silence before the first note. Attentive, grateful, readied for beauty. By late morning, if a morning that was still learning can be said to be late, they reached an overlook where the land fell away into a broad basin. In the basin's heart, a city rehearsed itself. Streets braided, markets murmured, windows learned their glitter. The soul felt a complexity there. Interlaced lives, crossed purposes, many mornings waking at once like a flock. The soul had loved the village's simplicity. Now it would learn the city's intricate kindness. "Before we go," said Water and Memory, "let us share the remembering place with them." "How?" asked the soul. Wind answered by rushing down into the basin in a single transparent ribbon, touching rooftops, dipping into courtyards, slipping under doors. Carried no dust, only hush. Breath followed, not to be seen, but to make space between heartbeats. The soul let its light pour through the ribbon, gentle, steady, even. They had learned the lesson of force. They would not forget it. They entered the city by the eastern gate, though no guard lifted a bar. The guard's thoughts were elsewhere, in the pocket where his child had placed a pebble for luck. The soul touched the pebble and it felt warm for no reason, which is one of the ways the world says yes. What the soul kept. The first baker sliding trays into an oven whose brick remembered thousands of mornings. A widow opening her shutters and placing a cup on the sill for the neighbor's cat that always came. Two students sharing a page because the book was dear and their friendship dearer. A lamplighter, though no lamps were needed yet, checking each post with pride, not from vanity but from a craftsman's secret joy in competence. Light kept these because keeping them meant keeping the city. What the soul let go. A shout meant to wound, which the morning absorbed and gentled until it returned to the speaker as a need to be quiet. A hurriedness that broke three small things that could have been spared if slowness had been chosen. A lie that tried to grow but found no soil where light lingered. Letting go did not mean neglect. It meant offering better food to appetites that had mistaken themselves. In a small studio above a shop that sold paper and string, a woman sat at a table carving letters into a woodblock. Each stroke was devotion, each curve a prayer for legibility. She would print a broadside later, an announcement of a harvest festival, with invitation tucked into the line to bring an extra bowl for someone without one. Her knife caught the soul's ray and flashed, and she paused, feeling the rightness of the place where hand, tool, and meaning joined. The soul stood behind her shoulder and waited for her to breathe out. She did, and the letter found its true line. In the street below, a boy swept after a cart. He was paid in coppers and the pride of work. The broom bristles wore slowly, faithful as an old friend. The boy's thoughts ran ahead to the river where he would throw a stick later and pretend it was a boat carrying a traveler to lands whose names were lullabies. The soul walked beside him and matched his pace until his feet slowed without reason and began to enjoy the act of sweeping for its own rhythm, not just its conclusion. The city became cleaner two ways at once. High atop a building with tiles laid like scales, a man repaired a leak that would not show until autumn. He knew that most would never know he had climbed today to grant them a dry season, and that knowledge did not sadden him. The soul watched him choose a better tile when a good enough one tempted his hand. Invisible generosity is a kind of dawn the day forgets to thank, and so the morning thanked it now with a small breeze that made the man feel, without understanding why, accompanied. Near noon, the soul found a hospital courtyard where a tree grew with leaves like sighs. On a bench beneath, a nurse sat with her head tipped back, eyes closed. Closed. The night had asked much of her. Morning offered the pause night had gifted, and she took it like water. The soul stood near her shoulder. Breath surrounded them. Water and memory brought the sound of a river too far to hear but close enough to steady. When the nurse opened her eyes, the world felt a little more possible. She did not know why. Knowing why is not always needed when the task is to go on. The city deepened, and the soul deepened with it. If it had been capable of pride, it would have felt the right kind. The pride of a caretaker who sees people gentled into their better selves by noticing. But the soul was not tending for credit. It was learning how to be given away without being spent. At a crossing where 4 streets met and made a modest square, a musician tuned a small instrument whose name belonged to one language but whose voice belonged to all. The traveler from the plain happened by, reed in pocket. The two exchanged glances and an almost smile that is halfway between stranger and friend. They played first side by side, then, without planning, together. A few coins rang in the bowl, but more precious were the uncountable small recalibrations in passers-by. A clenched jaw softened, a hurried foot slowed, a quarrel postponed itself until it forgot to exist. Music does that when morning holds the space around it. The soul listened as its own melody, learned in the unlit ages, threaded through the city's sounds, the calls, the carts, the kettle hiss without jostling. In that weaving it discovered a further truth. Light is not the loudest thing in the room. It is the room's ability to hear itself without fear. By the time the sun reached its own remembering place overhead, the companions knew the lesson of the day. Light keeps the ordinary. It lets go of what does not serve kindness. It returns, tirelessly, to anyone who chooses gentleness even once. The soul folded this understanding into the flame that would, one evening far from now, become a lantern in someone's tired hands. "Shall we rest?" asked Breath, honoring night's gift. "For a little," said the soul. "Then we will go to the river the boy imagined. It is almost ready to be real." They found a courtyard near a fountain that sculpted shade into cool. Wind leaned its back against a wall and made a low, companionable sound. Water and memory traced spirals in the basin and learned where fish would like to sleep when fish became. The ember pulsed like a cat. The soul closed its eyes that were not eyes and held the pause at its center like a cup that refills itself by being held. In that pause, far beyond where streets fade into fields, a young woman on a hill lifted her face and knew without knowing that something had been woven for her. She would descend later with a basket and find that the first apples had ripened sweeter than last year's. She would bite and think, "This tastes like a song I knew as a child." She would be right. The song had walked the city that day and then gone visiting in the orchards. Morning travels that way when invited. The pause ended like a page turned without sound. The soul rose. "To the river," it said, And the companions smiled, because rivers are the kind of story everyone loves to hear again. They left the city by a path that had been trodden by hope before feet. At the edge, the lamplighter, duty done for now, looked up and lifted a hand as if to touch something just out of reach. He didn't touch. He didn't need to. The morning met him halfway, which was all he wanted. Beyond, the land lowered its voice. The river's bed was a curve that earth dreams when it hums to itself. The soul stood at the highest bend and listened. From under stone, from the ribs of hill, from the throat of a spring not yet daring, a murmur gathered. Water in memory shivered with recognition. Breath matched the rhythm. Wind stayed very still, the way even talkative friends grow quiet when a baby is about to be born. "Let it find its own first word," said the ember. The murmur grew to a syllable, the syllable widened to a phrase, and then the phrase flowed. The river was not a torrent, a beginning, took its first turn like a child discovering balance. It brushed against reeds that had not known they were reeds. It invented glitter. The sun leaned down, not proprietary, merely affectionate, and laid a long hand across the water's back. The river arched into the touch and continued. "Name?" Wind asked out of ceremony rather than need. The soul listened. The river spoke its name to itself first, as all true things do. It did not rush to share. After a while it sent a fragment of the name to a stone, another to a tree, a third to the air, so that the world would remember for it on days when its own remembering felt thin. The companions walked along the bank. They watched a dragonfly practice distance, near, far, near, the way a thought approaches clarity. They watched a pair of deer come to the edge and reconsider, choosing shade today and drink later, because even thirst has wisdom when unafraid. They watched the light lay coins on the surface and the current spend them generously without keeping any account at all. "You will carry many mornings," the soul told the river, "and you will teach many evenings how to let go." The river answered by widening a little where children would someday throw their boats. It made a shallow that invited bare feet and kept sharp stones beneath the deeper path where future fish would run. It learned how to make a voice that comforted the edges of the day. When the afternoon leaned toward its own kind of thoughtfulness, the soul turned back toward the city, not to return, but to look from afar. From that distance, the city was not streets and roofs. It was a glow, a held candle seen through cupped hands. The soul understood. Light does not live only in the rising. It lives in what the rising enables. "Tomorrow," said breath in the tone of a promise that does not bind, "we will learn how light forgives, and how it remembers without keeping score," said water in memory. Night in balance, far off, heard and approved. Wind ran a fingertip along the ridge and found a path for evening to enter without startling anyone. The ember warmed itself with the thought of lamps, small, human, patient. As the day began its slow bow, the soul stood very still and thanked the ordinary for allowing itself to be kept. In that stillness, 1,000 small mercies took root where they would flower at times and places the soul would never be. That is how mornings work when their purpose is love. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. The day after the river was born, the soul lingered near its banks as if reluctant to move on. The air was tender with beginnings. Mist rose like thoughts still half asleep, not yet choosing shape. The companions gathered quietly, breath stretching like a cat after rest, wind humming without purpose, water in memory shining with its reflection doubled, and the ember pulsing faintly, warm but listening. Today, said Breath, the river learns to remember. And we? Asked the soul. We learn how light forgives, said Water in memory. It will be a slow lesson. The soul nodded, its flame steady. Forgiveness, it already sensed, was not a single act but a rhythm, a motion between giving and letting be. They followed the river's curve, where it widened into meadows of unmeasured green. Each blade of grass caught a note of sunlight and held it for a heartbeat before passing it to the next. Birds practiced song without expectation, and the world itself seemed to breathe in pairs. Inhale of shadow, exhale of light. Everything was in rehearsal for grace. At the edge of the meadow stood a woman weaving. Her loom was simple, her colors drawn from earth and dawn. She hummed as she worked, not to distract herself, but to match her rhythm to something older than task. Each thread she placed seemed to carry the day's kindness a little further into form. When the wind paused to listen, the soul did too. What does she weave? Asked the soul. Her own remembering, said Water in memory. A pattern that will outlive her hands. The woman stopped, noticing a loose thread. For a moment her brow furrowed, not with anger, but with the small ache of imperfection. She sighed, tugged gently, and smiled when the flaw became beauty. The soul glowed in quiet agreement. Forgiveness, it realized, is often this, the moment when flaw becomes design. They continued along the meadow's edge until they reached a grove of trees. The air was cooler there, ripened with shadow. Beneath the largest tree knelt a young man, head bowed over a stone tablet. His fingers moved carefully, tracing lines that shimmered faintly. The soul watched, curious, as words appeared. Not carved, but revealed, as though the stone had always known what it wanted to say. What does he write? Asked Wind. His apology, said Breath, to someone who cannot hear it, and yet will. The soul stepped closer. The lines on the stone were simple, almost shy. Asterisk, I did not understand your silence. I see now that it was love waiting for my noise to quiet. Asterisk, the soul felt the warmth of the ember expand within. Light does not erase shadow, it thought. It teaches it to speak gently. When the young man finished, he placed his hand on the stone and whispered something too soft for sound. Then he stood and walked away lighter than before. The grove exhaled. A leaf fell. The soul caught it and saw, in the veins of its green, the map of every forgiveness ever offered and not refused. As they moved on, a new figure appeared on the path ahead. She was cloaked in gray, her steps unhurried. Where she walked, colors dulled, not from sorrow, but from focus, as though she was removing the world's noise for a moment. She greeted them with a nod that felt like a door opening inward. I am reflection, she said. Forgiveness, sister. The companions bowed, for reflection was old even among the beginnings. Do you come to test us? Asked the soul. To remind you, said reflection. Forgiveness does not live in words, but in the quiet after them. She drew from her cloak a bowl of still water. Look, she said. The soul gazed into the bowl and saw not its own light, but countless faces. The weaver, the writer, the nurse, the child. Each carried a shadow on one side of their face and glow on the other. The shadows moved like clouds. None stayed long. "They are learning," said the soul softly. "As are you," said reflection. "Light that remembers must also forget the weight of itself. To forgive is to stop keeping score against the dark." She set the bowl upon the ground, and where it touched, a small pool formed. Water and memory flowed into it, and the two merged until they could no longer be told apart. "Go on," said reflection. "You will find what light keeps next." When they left the grove, the land rose into soft hills. Villages dotted the slopes, tiny sparks of habit and hope. In one, a man tended a kiln. In another, a mother mended her child's torn sleeve with thread finer than gold. Everywhere, people practiced the quiet heroism of continuation. The soul paused on a ridge, watching smoke climb from chimneys. The sight was humbler than stars, and somehow more moving. "Is this forgiveness too?" it asked. "It is its echo," said breath. "Each act of care repairs a tear the world forgot to mend." At the foot of the ridge they met a bridge, not yet finished. Workers rested on its half-built span, sharing water and bread. The soul drifted among them unnoticed, though a few smiled without knowing why. One man, older than the rest, ran his hand along the unjoined beams. "It will meet in the middle," he said, "but only if both sides build." The soul watched his hand and thought of all the unseen bridges between hearts, waiting for both sides to try. Light forgives, the soul realized, by keeping the space open for crossing. The day lengthened. Shadows grew thoughtful. They reached a plateau where the horizon spread like an unwritten line. There the companions rested. Wind braided the grasses, water in memory murmured softly, and the ember hummed like a lullaby heard through another room. "I think," said the soul, "I understand a little more. Forgiveness is light remembering its own gentleness." As she vanished, night approached, not with drama, but with gratitude. The first stars blinked awake, their lessons patient and unhurried. The soul lay beside the river's hum and felt the day's stories settle like sand after a current. Somewhere far away, in a house not yet built, someone turned in their sleep and released a hurt they had held too long. The soul felt the release as warmth spreading across the unseen. It smiled. The ember pulsed once, twice. "Tomorrow," it whispered, "we learn how light remembers what it loves." Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth. The next morning arrived not with light, but with the memory of it. A soft warmth lingering beneath the horizon, the echo of radiance preparing to be reborn. The soul stirred where it had rested by the river. Breath unfolded first, then wind, then water in memory, each companion stretching as if to greet the slow turning of the world. "What will we learn today?" asked the soul. "How light remembers what it loves," said breath, "and how it keeps those memories without chains." The ember flickered at the soul's core, steady and patient. "To remember," it said, "is to continue loving even after time changes the form of what is loved." They followed the river downstream, where its current widened and its voice deepened. Villages mirrored in its calm surface like thoughts remembered in kindness. Along the banks, people worked, washing cloth, tending nets, singing songs that were both prayers and gratitude. The morning had learned the language of ordinary devotion. As they walked, The soul felt the quiet hum of recognition. They do not see me, it said, but they know I am here. That is love's way, said water in memory. When love remembers rightly, it does not need proof, only presence. They came upon a tree that leaned over the water, its branches heavy with fruit. Beneath it, a woman sat with an infant sleeping in her arms. The fruit above glowed faintly in the light's early grace. A gentle wind shook one loose. It fell, rolled near the woman's foot, and came to rest. She looked down, smiled, and whispered something too soft for sound. She took the fruit and placed it beside the sleeping child as if giving the dawn a second cradle. She remembers, said the soul softly. She never forgot, said breath. Mothers are the memory of light made flesh. They lingered, watching the scene until the river's song called them onward. Downstream, the water began to quicken, tumbling over stones that caught the morning like laughter caught in glass. Wind darted ahead, then returned, excited. There is a place of echoes, it said. Come see. The path led them to a hollow where cliffs rose in twin arcs, facing each other like cupped hands. A stream poured between them, scattering its music into the air. When the soul spoke, its voice returned in a shimmer, not identical, but softer, transformed. Is that me? It asked. It is you remembered by the world, said water in memory. Echo is love's reflection across distance. It reminds you that what you give returns, though changed. The soul tried again, whispering, Thank you. The cliffs replied with a sigh that carried the sound farther than any wing could fly. Somewhere beyond, a wanderer paused, feeling peace without reason. Love had traveled invisibly and found its mark. As the sun climbed, they reached a field of mirrors. Not the crafted kind, but natural pools of still water scattered through low grass. Each pool held a piece of sky. When clouds drifted by, they bent to admire themselves. When birds crossed overhead, their wings folded briefly into reflection. The soul knelt by one pool and looked, and for the first time saw not itself but all it had touched. The village's laughter, the child's dream, the craftsman's steady hands, the nurse's sigh, all there rippling gently. I see them, the soul whispered, but not me. That is the gift, said breath. When light remembers what it loves, it stops seeking its own image. The soul watched until the breeze disturbed the surface, scattering the memories into motion. It smiled. They are free now, it said. Yes, said water in memory, and that is how they stay. By afternoon, the companions reached a hill crowned with an ancient stone circle. Moss clothed the pillars. Vines traced patterns like veins of memory. In the center lay an altar of plain rock, uncarved. The air there was neither warm nor cold. It felt like thought made gentle. On the altar rested a single flame, small but unwavering. The soul approached. Is it mine? It asked. In part, said the ember. This is the archive of light, where every kindness, however fleeting, is remembered, not as record, but as warmth. The flame on the altar pulsed as if greeting the soul. For a moment, the world went quiet. Even the wind folded its breath. The soul felt within itself the echo of countless gestures. Hands offering bread, eyes softening in forgiveness, Voices sang I see you without words. They were not grand, but they endured. Does light ever forget? The soul asked. Only what was never truly given, said the flame on the altar. Memory belongs to sincerity. The soul bowed. Then I remember them all. You do, said breath, because they are you. A hush deeper than silence passed through the circle. The flame merged into the ember, not vanishing but multiplying. The soul's light softened, not brighter, not dimmer, just nearer. Wind stirred, carrying a scent of rain from far away. It was time to move again. They descended the hill as twilight gathered. Birds traced slow arcs homeward. The sky, once blue as breath, became violet with gratitude. The soul watched as the world prepared to rest, each creature performing its small ritual of belonging. Lamps lit, windows closed, songs finished but not forgotten. When night arrived, it was kind. Stars shimmered like memories waking from sleep. The river glowed faintly in their borrowed light, each ripple a story told again in quieter voice. The soul lay beside it, eyes open to infinity. Love remembers, it thought, not to hold but to keep safe. The ember flickered, content. Tomorrow we learn how light dreams, it murmured, and the soul, warm with memory and peace, drifted toward that dream, not away from the world, but deeper into its heart. Night lingered softly over the river, and when the horizon began to pale again, the soul stirred. Dawn was not in haste. The flame within it moved as if it, too, were waking from a dream of light learning to dream. When the first breath of morning touched the world, the companions gathered, breath humming low, water in memory glimmering with silver, wind unfolding its invisible wings, and the ember bright as a patient heart. Together they waited. What shall we learn today? Asked the soul. How light dreams, said breath, and how the world becomes what light imagines. The soul nodded. Then today, it said, we enter the dreaming of creation. They followed the river until it vanished into mist. The air shimmered with beginnings not yet chosen. Each step they took echoed softly, and the echoes turned to seeds of sound that floated like pollen. Beyond the mist lay a plain of glassy stillness. The ground itself seemed to reflect the sky, as though both had agreed to share the same face for a while. This is the threshold of vision, said water in memory. Here the world borrows from its own dreams. The soul stepped onto the plain and felt the glass pulse underfoot, warm, alive, whispering images into existence. Dreams are not illusions, said the ember. They are rehearsals for reality. Every mercy begins as someone's imagined kindness. The soul watched as the reflections around it deepened. It saw 1,000 small dreams blooming, a painter envisioning color that the world had never known, a traveler dreaming of home and in doing so, inventing the road back, a child dreaming of flight and teaching the wind a new game. All these, the soul whispered, are light remembering itself in new shapes. They walked for what could not be measured. The plain shifted from silver to gold to rose, depending on where the soul's gaze fell. Each hue carried a feeling: patience, wonder, longing, peace. And the companions understood that color was emotion given visible form. Is this how gods dream? Asked wind. No, said breath. This is how love does. As they journeyed farther, they came upon a vast lake. Its surface was so still that even the sun seemed shy to touch it. In its depths shimmered not reflection but potential, shapes waiting for permission to exist. The soul knelt beside it and whispered a thought it had never said aloud. May every dream that brings kindness find its dawn. The lake rippled once, then again. Light spread across it like breath across glass. Slowly, figures began to form, not of people, but of feelings. Hope taking the shape of a bird, forgiveness rising as a tide, courage standing as a tree. The world, it seemed, was listening. Water in memory smiled, its tone like rain on leaves. You have given them beginnings. They will grow, said the soul. When hearts remember them, they continued, the lake's glow following them like a silent hymn. The land began to rise, carrying them toward a ridge lined with translucent stones. Each stone held within it a pulse of color. Blue for sorrow understood, green for gratitude realized, gold for wonder returned. The soul touched one, and visions poured forth. A poet writing by candlelight, a child releasing fear, an elder forgiving the years that went too fast. The stones remembered dreams that had come true quietly, without celebration. Do dreams end when they come true? Asked the soul. No, said breath. They turn into memory, and memory is the soil where more dreams root. The ridge opened into a wide valley where night and day mingled in soft conversation. Here twilight lingered not as farewell, but as balance. The companions stood at its edge. This, said wind, is where the dreams of light and the dreams of shadow meet. The soul stepped forward carefully. The air was thick with presence, countless fragments of what could be and what once was. Some glowed faintly, others pulsed like slow stars. The soul reached out to one drifting nearby and felt within it a single wish. May I be kind, even when unseen. The wish dissolved into the flame within, leaving behind a sweetness like honey warming in the sun. Light dreams through us, said the ember. Every gentle thought becomes a thread in the unseen tapestry. They lingered there, listening to the murmur of unborn stories. The valley hummed with half-sung lullabies, with laughter waiting for a voice, with forgiveness stretching toward form. The soul realized that the world's beauty was not an accident. It was the waking residue of light's dream. From the far end of the valley, a figure appeared, moving slowly as if through water. It shimmered between shapes, now a man, now a bird, now a flame. When it spoke, its voice was like a chord played on wind. I am Dreamkeeper, it said, the guardian of what light imagines but cannot yet hold. The companions bowed, for Dreamkeeper was older than dawn but younger than memory. It carried in its hands a lantern made of sleep and song. Do you collect dreams? Asked the soul. I keep them safe until hearts are ready, said Dreamkeeper. And when those hearts awaken, I return them. The soul felt something stir, recognition, longing, reverence. Have you kept any of mine? Dreamkeeper opened the lantern. Inside, the soul saw fragments of light swirling like embers caught in water. One looked like a village sunrise, another a child's smile, another still, a quiet forgiveness beneath a willow tree. These are your dreams, Dreamkeeper said, woven through the world. You have already given them away. "Then why do I still dream?" asked the soul. "Because dreaming," said Dreamkeeper, "is how eternity breathes." The words settled in the soul like dew settling on petals. Everything felt still and infinite. Then Dreamkeeper offered the lantern. "Take it," it said. "You will need it when light forgets itself, and it always does, for a time." The soul received it with both hands, though hands were merely symbols now. The lantern's glow merged with the embers, deepening it, turning memory into promise. Wind swirled, carrying distant voices, lullabies, stories, sighs. They belonged to a million unseen dreamers, all whispering in their sleep the same truth. We remember light. The sky above began to blush with late-day hues. Twilight was near again. "What happens when light dreams too deeply?" asked the soul. "Then night carries it," said breath, "and teaches it how to rest." As darkness approached, Dreamkeeper vanished into the shimmer between stars. The companions stood watching until the horizon folded itself into velvet. The soul felt no sadness, only gratitude. They made camp beside a stand of luminous flowers that opened only after sunset. Each petal held a drop of moonlight like a kept secret. The river below murmured lullabies for the sleeping world. The soul held the lantern and watched its glow reflect in the petals. "Tomorrow," whispered the ember, "we learn how light endures." The soul nodded, letting the words drift into the night's quiet heart. And the world, half awake and half dreaming, listened. The world was quiet in its breathing when the last dream faded into morning. The soul awoke beside the lantern given by the Dreamkeeper, its glow steady but subdued, like a candle remembering the sun. Breath stirred first, followed by wind and water in memory. The ember rested deep inside the soul, pulsing with a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the dawn. "Today," said breath, "we learn how light endures." The soul nodded. "Not by strength," it said, "but by tenderness." The day began softly. Mist gathered over the fields where yesterday's dreams had walked, and dew clung to the grass like patient stars. The companions followed the curve of the river until it met the edge of the world, a wide, open plain where horizon and sky folded into one another. Everything shimmered faintly, as if waiting for renewal. "This is the verge," said water in memory, "where every ending becomes a beginning again." The soul felt a tremor of awe. "Is this where I began?" "Yes," said the ember, "and where you will begin again." Endurance is not staying. It is returning. The air thickened with golden hush. In the distance, a figure appeared, walking slowly toward them. The light bent around it, not to hide but to honor. When it drew near, the soul recognized it, the same presence that had watched at the world's first dawn, vast and tender as silence itself. The presence spoke without sound. "You have walked the length of remembering." The soul bowed, flame dimming in reverence. "I have learned how light forgives, how it dreams, how it remembers what it loves. Now I wish to know how it endures." "By giving itself away again and again," said the presence. "By burning without consuming, by loving without needing to last." The soul understood, though no word formed. Endurance was not resistance. It was participation in the endless cycle of renewal. The presence extended a hand of radiance. In its palm rested a small shard of shadow, delicate as soot. This, it said, asterisk is forgetting. Even light must forget, or else it cannot begin anew. Asterisk. The soul accepted the shard. It felt neither heavy nor cold, only necessary. What shall I do with it? Asked the soul. Carry it until it softens, said breath. When you no longer fear it, it will become part of your glow. The companions journeyed onward, and the land began to change. Hills folded into valleys, valleys into plains. The river thinned, threading itself toward the sea. At its mouth, the air smelled of salt and memory. Waves rolled in slow procession, their crests catching sunlight like laughter remembered from a distance. Here, said wind, light meets its oldest mirror. The soul walked to the edge where foam touched sand. The shard of shadow in its hand trembled, then melted into the surf. Darkness and light mingled without conflict, two halves of one language. The water sighed, relieved, and from the sigh rose a song. It was not sung by a voice, but by the world itself, the rhythm of tides and hearts and breathing. The companions stood still as it passed through them. What is this song? Asked the soul. It is the hymn of continuance, said the ember. It plays whenever light remembers how to return. The soul closed its eyes, letting the sound enter the deepest part of its being. Visions unfurled. The first dawn, the village's morning, the river's birth, the child's smile, the lantern's glow, all woven into one unbroken thread. Every ending had been a beginning wearing different colors. Then the soul heard another voice, quieter, nearer. It was the dreamkeeper, speaking from somewhere beyond sight. Dreams fade, it said, but their kindness lingers in the fabric of things. That is endurance. The soul smiled. Then light endures by leaving traces in love. Yes, said water in memory. It endures wherever something gentle happens. Evening approached. The sky blushed with the memory of all it had seen. The companions sat on the sand. Wind carved small songs in the dunes. Breath hummed the melody of rest, and the ember pulsed steadily. The soul lifted the lantern. Its flame, though small, held within it the reflection of all mornings past and all yet to come. Will I return to the world? It asked.